Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We begin our show at the White House, where President Trump is expected to hold his first cabinet meeting of the second term in office later today. And despite the fact that he's not officially a member of the cabinet, tech billionaire Elon Musk is expected to attend this meeting. This is going on during this firestorm created by his Department of Government Efficiency, cutting the federal workforce and gutting government departments.
This morning, those workers are facing more uncertainty and confusion. Musk says they will get a second chance to email in their accomplishments or face, quote, termination. Now, that's despite guidance from the Office of Personnel Management saying this is all voluntary. So many questions and workers' jobs at stake. The president was pressed yesterday to clarify Musk's request.
It's somewhat voluntary, but it's also if you don't answer, I guess you get fired.
Is he speaking for you when he says you'll be terminated?
Yeah, everybody speaks for me. I'm the one, I'll take responsibility. You know the old statement, the buck stops here, right?
Here to talk about all this and more, NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist and our senior national politics reporter John Allen. Good morning to both of you. Aaron, let's start with you. What can we expect from today's cabinet meeting, and how is Elon Musk's presence going to factor into all this, given this backlash over these mass layoffs and just the back and forth and confusion when it comes to Doge and other departments?
Well, some of that, Joe, I think is unknown at this point. We know this cabinet meeting is going to be happening at 11 o'clock this morning. President Trump will, of course, lead that meeting. At this point, we know that 18 of his cabinet-level picks, his secretaries in particular, have been confirmed. And so we'll at least see them around the table with President Trump. There are a few cabinet members who've yet to be, cabinet nominees who've yet to be confirmed. They will probably be in the room as well. And then, of course, we know from the press secretary that we should expect them to be giving the president updates on the work that they've been doing in identifying what the president has called waste, fraud, and abuse. The press secretary told us that was a key part of what we should expect to happen today. And of course, Elon Musk has been the leader of that effort, along with his Doge team inside the White House. And so we know that he'll be in the room. It's not at all unusual for senior advisors to the president to be in the room when these cabinet meetings happen. We'll be watching the optics of it all, though. It would be unusual for someone to be at the table who is not at the cabinet secretary level. Typically, you would see the president most closely surrounded by the vice president, secretary of state, defense, treasury, the attorney general, for example. And then senior advisors are oftentimes sort of seated around the room. We'll be looking to see where Elon Musk is at the table and the degree to which he engages in the conversation. We don't know how much of this meeting we'll be able to see on camera, but certainly we'll hear President Trump speak when that meeting gets underway at 11 o'clock, Joe and Savannah.
And we know you'll bring us those details, Aaron. John, let's bring you in here. So you've been digging deeper into this chainsaw approach Elon Musk and Doge are taking to the government. You wrote this great article really speaking with a lot of these federal workers about all these changes. What are you hearing from them, and what are you seeing the impact to be on these departments?
Yeah, Savannah, the point is absolute chaos, as you saw in that headline there. I spoke to several current and former government officials. In particular, the current officials were trying to figure out what exactly it was they're supposed to do when this first email went out on Saturday, basically telling them that if they didn't respond with 5 bullet points about what they did last week, that they would be fired. And then on Monday, many of the cabinet agencies told their workers, you don't have to respond to this. And then, Musk said essentially, well, this was kind of a warning. We'll come back with a second email. You might get fired for that. And basically what all these folks told me is that they spent a lot of time, and their bosses spent a lot of time figuring out how to respond to these emails, losing potentially tens of millions of dollars for the government in the name of the Department of Government Efficiency.
John, I also want to ask you about this video President Trump posted on his platform, Truth Social. Many people see it as highly offensive. It's an AI-generated video showing what appears to be the president's vision or someone's vision for Gaza as some kind of glamorous beach resort. It features the president, Elon Musk, the Israeli prime minister. Of course, Gaza is in the midst of a humanitarian catastrophe. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed. Do we have any idea why the president would post something like this right now?
Well, I'm not certain why he decided to post it right now. things raining down from heaven, I guess their money at this big gold statue. It reminds me a little bit of when the president was in North Korea, when he was doing negotiations with the North Koreans for a nuclear summit, where he sort of did a similar kind of video to show what could happen in North Korea. Part of it, though, I'm sure, is a distraction a little bit from basically a war that he said would have come to an end. There are two wars that he basically promised would come to an end on day one of his presidency. Hostilities, he said, would come to an end on day one of his presidency. And what we have not seen yet, it's essentially holding here with Gaza and the Israelis, and not holding with Ukraine and Russia, an actual end to, an end to these wars.
Aaron, we are also learning plans about the Trump administration has on immigration. Here's a couple details. One is possibly to deport unaccompanied migrant children that we mentioned a moment ago that had come here alone. The other is something called this new gold card visa scheme. Tell us about these.
Yeah, the administration has been looking at ways to reduce the number of undocumented migrants in this country. Obviously, we've seen so many of the actions that have been taken over the last month to round up undocumented immigrants who have committed crimes in particular. Some of those folks having been taken to Guantanamo Bay to begin the deportation process, others put on planes and taken to the countries that they come from. And so now there's talk about an effort that would put more focus on rounding up children. You mentioned this gold card. President Trump spoke about that in particular in the Oval Office yesterday as he was signing some executive orders. Right now, there's a program that allows immigrant investors to come into the country, to get green cards, and to have permanent resident status if they invest in businesses, if they create jobs in this country. That is a program that currently exists and one that the president says he wants to do away with in favor of the Trump gold card. I want you to hear what the president said about that.
We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card.
The president suggesting that those wealthy people would create jobs and contribute to the economy, would pay taxes. There are some questions about who would be allowed in through this program, who would be excluded in this program. We expect, Joe and Savannah, that in about 2 weeks we'll get more details about this. We did hear from the Commerce Secretary as he was standing in the Oval Office with the president and said that the vetting process would be similar to what already exists, but you'd be able to get this gold card with a $5 million payment to the U.S. government.
All right, Aaron, John, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Let's turn now to a major victory for House Republicans we mentioned. Last night, they approved a budget plan to pay for President Trump's sweeping agenda while seeking up to $2 trillion in spending cuts. The resolution was narrowly adopted 217 to just 215 during a dramatic floor vote. Just one Republican joined Democrats in voting against it.
After the vote, Speaker Mike Johnson celebrated the win, while Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries issued a stark warning.
This is the first important step in opening up the reconciliation process. We have a lot of hard work ahead of us, but we are going to deliver the America First agenda. We're going to deliver all of it, not just parts of it, and this was the first step in that process.
The House Republican budget resolution will set in motion the largest Medicaid cut in American history. It's outrageous.
Now, this brings Republicans another step closer to passing what President Trump has called one big, beautiful bill, but a lot of work still needs to be done.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin. You can see is with us. Julie, good morning. So when we spoke yesterday, there was still enough opposition among Republicans to sink this budget plan. And then last night there was some back and forth over whether this vote should have even happened. So how did Speaker Mike Johnson end up pulling this off?
Yeah, back and forth is putting it lightly. Speaker Johnson actually called the vote off after holding the floor for an hour building when all of a sudden they were called back to the floor to vote on this House budget resolution. This comes after all day long we were hearing from some House Republicans, including Victoria Spartz and and Warren Davidson saying no way, they will not support this bill. Of course, some pressure from the other side of Pennsylvania Avenue in the White House started to kick in. We heard that President phone calls with members trying to get them to support this budget resolution, which again is the first step in beginning to unlock funding for his agenda at the border, energy, drill baby drill, what we heard him saying on the campaign trail, those mass deportations, military, and extending his 2017 tax. It's all in all, 217 to 215. Just one Republican, Thomas Massie, who's been a no on everything, including his speakership a couple of weeks ago, voting with all Republicans to pass bill. Again, though, just the first step in a very long process, and certainly something even Senate Republicans who had their own version didn't affect.
All right, Julie Sirkin, thank you there for your reporting. Obviously, a bad internet connection. We'll try to continue that conversation.
All right, the Supreme Court handed a death row inmate a rare victory. On Tuesday, the court threw out Oklahoma prisoner Richard Glossip's murder conviction. The justices ruled that he is entitled to a new trial because of prosecutorial misconduct. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has more.
He's been on death row for more than 20 years. The Supreme Court granted Richard Glossip a new trial.
I talked to Rich, and he is beyond thrilled. We've struggled through 9 execution dates and 3 last meals, and all Rich wanted was the truth to come out.
Convicted by a jury in Oklahoma for organizing the 1997 killing of his boss, Barry Van Treese, Glossip has always maintained his innocence. Lester spoke with him by phone in 2023.
Did you have anything to do with the murder of Barry Van Treese?
I did not.
Independent reviews of the case commissioned by state officials finding the prosecution destroyed key evidence before Glossip's trial and failed to correct false testimony from a key witness, prompting a rare concession from Oklahoma's Attorney General that Glossip's conviction should be overturned. Lester sitting down back in 2023 with 2 conservative lawmakers fighting on Glossip's behalf, just as news broke that the Supreme Court had agreed to hear the case and stop Glossip's execution.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The justices concluding in a divided opinion, the prosecution violated its constitutional obligation to Glossip. But an attorney for the victim's family says they remain undeterred.
The family members are confident that when there's a retrial in this case, it will clearly show that Glossip is guilty of first-degree murder.
As for what comes next here, the DA's office is saying they've actually formed a committee to review any cases eligible for the death penalty, and Mr. Glossip's case will not be finalized until that work is done. Back to you.
All right, Laura, thank you so much. Let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos for more on this. So given what we know, what are the odds we even see a new trial, or could prosecutors just say, let's let this one go?
Yeah, I've had cases like this, and initially it's not unusual for the prosecutors to say, we will retry this case. But once they get out all the dusty old banker's boxes and they start looking to see where the witnesses are, they may not actually end up retrying the case. I've really had this come up in my own cases. And after, in this case, 30 years, 3 decades, how are you going to pull in all the missing witnesses? Now, sometimes you can just read their testimony into the record, but not always. It depends on the rules and the conditions. And so it is a difficult case for prosecutors. This is a major victory, getting a new trial. Getting a new trial 1 year after your conviction, not as good. After 3 decades, it's fantastic because you really have a shot at the new trial.
Danny, what are the biggest points the defense will rely on, do you think, if this does go back to court?
The exact issues that were raised by the Supreme Court that go directly to the credibility of the one witness who identified and implicated this defendant, Glossip. There really wasn't much evidence other than the one guy who cooperated, the actual killer, who cooperated and agreed to testify against Glossip for a reduced sentence. They have more information now, including the circumstances under which he was prescribed lithium and his diagnosis and other information, some of which was known originally, but more information since emerged that was clearly not known at the time of trial. That now will come in and make it more difficult to secure a conviction.
Let's talk about that one guy. His name is Justin Sneed. He's the one who actually carried out the murder. He pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. He's accused of lying on this stand. Still alive, so if we do get a new trial, I mean, we would almost certainly see him on the stand again. What does that look like? How does that work?
Yeah, and consider now, this time, you have an entire trial transcript full of testimony that you can mine for potentially inconsistent statements. I have this literally going on right now with one of my cases, that you go through the entire trial testimony, and then when they testify, you don't get depositions in criminal cases. So a lot of times when the witness takes the stand, you really have a limited idea of what they're going to say. But in this case, if he deviates this Snead from his original trial testimony, he's going to get hammered. So that is a benefit to the defense. You get an outline of what the prosecution's going to do. They're not going to change their plan. And you're going to get an entire transcript that witness has to testify perfectly consistently with, or else you're just going to hammer him with his inconsistencies, even though they were 30 years ago.
Makes it much easier to get to reasonable doubt, I would think.
I would think so, yeah, but not always.
How unusual is it, kind of some of the details here, like that there was error admitted?
That, you mean that the prosecution failed to disclose information?
Yeah.
Well, as a defense attorney, and I'm biased, we claim this happens all the time on appeal, or when we're filing what's called a habeas or challenging our conviction. We often claim that prosecutors fail to turn over evidence, and sometimes they do. The key is whether or not it would have made a difference. That's usually the analysis that an appellate court will make. They'll say, well, okay, they may have failed to disclose something, because prosecutors are not required to disclose anything and everything we want them to. There are very strict rules, and in fact, discovery in criminal cases is more limited than discovery in civil cases. So courts realize that, and they look and they say, okay, here's some information they failed to disclose. Did it make a difference? Then you have to engage in this sort of imaginary situation where you imagine the jury and imagine whether or not they would have reached a different conclusion based on this evidence if they had had access to it. So it is an exercise in imagination, this kind of appeal, but the defense will have this information this time around, and presumably it will make an even stronger case for reasonable doubt.
All right. Danny, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
We've got yet another scary aviation incident to tell you about. This one was a very close call at Chicago's Midway Airport. Here's video recorded by an airport surveillance camera. It shows a Southwest Airlines flight on its final landing approach when a small jet rolls right into its path. There it is on the runway. NBC News' Aaron McLaughlin has more on the latest event that's putting airline passengers on edge.
At Chicago's Midway International Airport, an investigation after yet another stunningly close call. The video captured on an airport webcam shows Southwest Flight 2504 nearly touching down. The same moment a private jet crosses the runway. The flight abruptly pulls up, averting potential disaster.
Southwest 2504 going around.
It was surreal. Passengers Emily Novak and Kaylee Mask were on board the Southwest flight from Omaha. What went through your mind when you saw the video?
Shock.
Yeah.
Because we were so oblivious to what was happening, because the pilot was so calm and he acted like it was just an everyday, thing.
The FAA says the Flexjet private jet entered the runway without authorization. Flexjet released a statement saying it's investigating and adheres to the highest safety standards. Meanwhile, Southwest says its crew followed safety procedures, circled the airport, and landed safely. It's the latest in a string of air disasters and mishaps. From the midair collision that killed 67 near Reagan National Airport to the air disaster in Philadelphia, a crash landing in Toronto, and most recently, an emergency landing after a cabin filled with haze over Atlanta.
The circumstances have been quite different in each one of these accidents or incidents, so it's still too early to draw a common thread through all of them.
All of it rattling travelers nationwide. From a consumer confidence standpoint, are we nearing a tipping point?
No, I don't think we're nearing a tipping point, but aviation is still incredibly safe, and hopefully this is not the beginning of some long-term trend.
All right, our thanks to Aaron McLaughlin for that report. Well, one aviation expert told NBC News that close calls like this are extremely rare and have actually been declining in recent years.
All right, after what felt like endless rounds of frigid temperatures and heavy snow, springtime trying to make an early arrival. Above average highs are in store over the next several days.
All right, y'all, I am not even doing coat. I'm going just vest.
Oh.
Angie Lassman, good morning, and it is so fun.
I don't know if I put my stamp of approval on that. You get in the shade and it's like 50 and it's a little chilly, but I get it. We are all very excited that our temperatures are above normal finally, especially when you compare them to what we were dealing with with just last week with that really kind of coldest air of the season that had settled in for most of the country. It's a different story this week, though. Notice what you're looking at. These are temperatures above normal for this time of year. It's almost the entire country that's seeing that. And we're actually going to see highs that are running more than 10 degrees above normal for about 170 million people today, specifically east of the Rockies for most. You can see temperatures into the high 50s for parts of the plains. We've got 70s on tap once again for Dallas, El Paso. We have a whole lot of folks that are going to see 80s for the Southwest. It'll be feeling very summer-like in Phoenix today. We've got 70 degrees in Lexington and upper 70s for Atlanta. Over the last year, we've seen this kind of trend where we've had a whole lot more warmer than normal days versus colder than average days. And it just shows you that some of these are talking 2 to 1 different, more than two times that in some spots. El Paso had 65 days where temperatures were 10 degrees warmer than the average versus the 19 days that it was colder than the average. And that just gives you kind of the indication over the last year that it is more common for us to see unseasonably warm temperatures versus the cold. Although last week it was very cold. Now, looking ahead to tomorrow, we see the high 50s in New York. So still, Savannah is going to be walking around in a tank top, I think. We've got upper 60s for Richmond, 77 for Columbia. The middle of the country, you are going to keep the warmth going, too. It's high 50s across the Dakotas. We've got low 40s in Illinois, 59 degrees for St. Louis. So overall, really kind of mild air that has settled in for the next couple of days. It does get a little cooler by the time we get into the beginning part of our weekend, especially if you live in those northern tier states. So Chicago, you're into the 50s on Friday, but you get a rude awakening on Saturday when your high is near freezing. 50 degrees on Saturday in Evansville, and you're down to the 40s. Even Atlanta, you kind of hover into the 60s and the 70s. New York City goes back to those mid-50s on Saturday, and then again, the 30s return just in time for us to wrap up our weekend. Big picture look elsewhere across the country. We do have some fog that we're dealing with this morning. So if you're traveling along I-10, I-45 along the Gulf Coast, places like Lake Charles between Baton Rouge as well, that's where you're going to see reduced visibilities. We've got about a half of a mile visibility in New Iberia and Lake Charles and Beaumont. You can see a quarter of a mile. That extends up to Alexandria. So it's going to take a little time for this to kind of mix out and for us to see those better visibilities as the morning goes on. But in the meanwhile, of course, taking a little extra slow and using those low beams. We do have a couple of systems that are working across parts of the Great Lakes. This is one of them. This is a clipper system that's bringing us a little rain. Green Bay, Chicago, Lafayette, all dealing with some of those showers. And we even have a little bit of kind of wintry mix and even some snow working in there. This is going to be something that's going to be a fast mover, but does bring us some light snow across Michigan and Wisconsin today and eventually into interior portions of the Northeast. We'll also see the rain from essentially Ohio, Pennsylvania, down to Missouri. So umbrellas needed for that region. And then this shifts farther east into the Northeast for tomorrow. And then here comes our next clipper system. These are going to be kind of, just one after another, but really quick movers and not a whole lot of snow associated with them. This system slides into the Great Lakes on Friday, and that's really where we see most of the snow. Some spots downwind of the lakes could see some substantial amounts, maybe 4 to 5 inches in the higher amounts. But overall, elsewhere, maybe an inch or so. Places like Buffalo, Erie, Green Bay could pick up a couple of flakes, but not a whole lot in the way of snowfall, which, of course, is good news when we consider we are ready for spring. Big picture look on Friday. A lot of sunshine. Look at that, guys. This deserves some applause, I think. Finishing out our work week with mild highs, sunny skies take us into Saturday. We, of course, have those snow showers for parts of New England, but otherwise, I think it looks pretty good. Now, some rain and snow to watch on Sunday for our friends out west and a couple of showers for parts of the plains, but I think the 70s along the Gulf Coast with a whole lot of sunshine is the winning spot on Sunday for me.
They're excited. It's been so long, I think, for them.
Yes, and we know they don't do well with like 50s. So.
Right, exactly. They're not in the best.
Right,
50s.
correct.
All right.
We love it. Thank you, Angie.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.